So thank you, everybody. This has been exciting. I've already learned some nice stuff. Our team is busy on our chat, actively discussing the content. My name is Stephen Ekker. I'm at the Mayo Clinic. My day job is professor of biochemistry and molecular biology, but I have been an entrepreneur at the University of Minnesota before I moved to Mayo and at Mayo. And I believe that entrepreneurship is going to be a critical asset for translational science. And I'll talk about that science just for a second. From one perspective is that Mayo Clinic is celebrating its 10th anniversary of policy that allows entrepreneurship. Before 2011, entrepreneurship was banned by Mayo Clinic. So what we've had to do in the last 10 years is to start from scratch and to think about entrepreneurship and building it from an ecosystem point of view. And so we've had to go out and reach and learn from a lot of others, including many here, on what we want to do for our entrepreneurship. And so most of what I'm going to tell you about is how we've been jumpstarting our 0 to 1 on the ecosystem side, using education as a key component, but as we're progressing more extensively into actually new startups. So that's where we're at. I'd love to share our stories and share our experiences and some of our, any of our tools and technologies we're happy to share. So with that, I'm going to start sharing our screen. See if I can make sure that works properly. And I'll ask the obligate, do you see my slides?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, so the purpose of the Office of Entrepreneurship is to empower a culture of innovation and entrepreneurship through education. As I mentioned, it's only been possible the last 10 years at Mayo, and we're in our 6th year. So I have no corporate relationships represented here, so there's no disclosures. We are focusing on what we, in Mayo, is our discovery, translate, apply continuum. That's our jargon for our space, but it's really around the issue of translational science. Conventional translational science is bench to bedside. We saw a version of this slide, but we know in especially healthcare, it's almost always bench to business to bedside. So something we call the 3B model. And we are really focused on empowering and understanding how to do a 3B model and not a 2B model for translational science. So that puts us smack in our CTSA center, the Center for Advancing Translational Science at Mayo Clinic, and that's how we live. We focus on developing this 5-petal diagram of our outcomes. We have a set of formal education. I'll show you one slide on those. We have targeted education, which is for non-traditional learners, but in our 70,000 Mayo Clinic ecosystem of employees and staff. We support startup space on all 3 of our campuses because we're actually a 3-campus-wide process. And we service with communications and networking and diversity, equity, and inclusion. Our formal education is now tied to we have a master's in translational science. Sometimes people ask me, what does that mean? There's something like 12,000 IRB registered trials happening today at the Mayo Clinic. So much translation is happening at the Mayo Clinic that we have a whole program on the science of translation, and it's under the NCATS funding for educational training grant. We have a PhD and master's programs. We are tied to that program and developed it under that program, and we have 4 courses. They are all now Higher Learning Commission graduate courses. They're also accredited in the medical school. And they allow also PhDs and other learners to get a certificate for taking these courses. So we've had really substantive growth in the last few years, and we're approaching the point where our classes are essentially capped based on our traditional learning metrics. We also support community events, pitch competitions, both internal and externally facing pitch competitions, one each in the Florida and Arizona campuses, and then one tied to the Minnesota campus in partnership with the University of Minnesota and their technology transfer office. And that's a publicly facing event and celebration process. One of the distinguishing features of these pitch competitions is that we actually have teams pitching in diverse categories all at the same time. That's intentional. It's to allow, it's too hard to go from idea to IPO. So breaking it down into much smaller steps so that it's visible is a key part of our educational experience. And then sharing other teams as they move through their journeys so that they're potential resources for our teams. It's that true community process. Our targeted education is an area that we are really exploring in detail because we know innovators are everywhere. And for example, our nursing staff, which is for anybody that knows Mayo, knows that Mayo runs, the clinic runs as the nurses run. And they are fantastic innovators in their space. And we are really trying to untap and enable them to be a functional, not just innovators, but now moving to entrepreneurship. Our formal entrepreneurial education is really focused around the Lean Startup for life sciences. We've adapted a Lean Startup, the classic I-Core program, but really focused on life sciences. And we've broken it out into these formal classes, the fundamentals class, which is really a value proposition and team and ideation. Financial business case, really trying to get you to understand what's going to cost to put this all together and what's the business opportunity to a minimal viable product. And then we're now just launching an SBIR course. So the idea is to get that initial substantive initial funding. We've also identified as a part of this process a need for incubator space. And in Rochester, Minnesota, we didn't have any such space. We're in only 110,000 size community. So these are hard and we don't have a major university to rent space from. So what we started was an innovative approach that I would call the Airbnb for innovation. And we started what's called the Hatchery. And it's just to support early teams, ideally tied to Mayo Clinic IP, to be able to launch their program and their SBIR, SDTR grants. We have 2 successful startups. They're graduating this year, and we have 2 new startups signed up for 2021. So this space was initially initiated around empty lab space when a laboratory turnover happens naturally in our academic medical center. And we now have a dedicated space, but I think you can run a hatchery without that. We proved that we can do that for 3 years and get a couple of companies launched with that space. Everybody has research space. Everybody says they don't have space, but the space is there. And then our networking, I want to really emphasize that we believe that the fundamental gap of women innovators is a huge issue. We are an almost 70% women organization, and Mayo Clinic really wants to untap all of our potential. To do that means we need to be able to teach basics. I like the pre-innovation or pre-entrepreneurship. Really get the basic understanding to our community that may have not been exposed to this as a 10-year-old. And we really want to focus on that. And so WeSpark is a really active program run by women innovators and entrepreneurs and really focusing on this for community building. We also have a number of other groups. We actually, to focus in that space, we have some other DEI programs, including a new summer program for partnership with undergraduates. We also have the ability to think about what we call our innovation sprints, trying to get people to get beyond, thinking beyond the initial space and get it really into ideation. Our team is run by staff, in this case, PhD staff on all 3 of our sites. They are full-time staff on the sites, and I think that's critical. We have partnerships with Mayo Clinic Ventures and our Technology Transfer and Business Office, and we have other partners with Office of Translation to Practice is a partnership under our CTSA for project support. We are people support. OTP and these other funding agencies actually are project support, and those are our partnerships in our ecosystem. So I want to highlight that we have had several of our graduates already through our program, including Dr. Katie Campbell is now the first faculty member. She teaches entrepreneurship at St. Kate's up in St. Paul. And so we're building out this academic credentialing that Nalaka was talking about in our other academic centers around our community here in Minnesota, and we're hoping to partnership with other sites in Arizona and Florida. These ongoing collaborations include, as I mentioned some of them, but also this particular partnership with the University of Pennsylvania, and as well as University of Illinois. These are all where we're actively growing. We also have nonprofit partnerships with the Collider Foundation, where they're key in the community, and our Destination Medical Center. They're here in Rochester, Minnesota. I should have specified Minnesota, not New York. Most people think of Rochester and New York. So this is all Rochester, Minnesota. We are actively focusing on pushing and growing our teams in our hatchery, but also the ability for the teams that we have learned, our alumni, we're building our alumni network that have been taking these classes or getting the certificates, helping them with what needs to get done, for example, with non-diluted capital or with connecting with a number of the resources that were already listed here. And so we see that as our next phase and next wave of the program. Feel free to reach us. We have an easy email, oe@mayo.edu. We have a LinkedIn showcase page for people to connect with us, and we have a website, externally facing website on our Mayo website to reach out. So we are very delighted to be here and look forward to continuing to collaborate. Thank you.
Well, Stephen, thank you so much. It's great to have presented with you again, you know, that we're doing it again. Maybe we'll just go on the road and keep doing this. It's wonderful. Not only do you describe things well, but your slides are beautiful, and I always hear about new things that you're doing. So I saw that there was a question from Jules, and I was wondering if maybe you could give Jules some answers here, because Jules said that, I assume Mayo tried to set up a fellowship for groups that had successful projects but could not get the funding within the institution. So I often think of us as innovation educators as being sort of intrapreneurs within our own institution to justify why they should spend money on educating people rather than on the next cell and gene therapy. So I just was wondering if you might have some guidance there about this, that you started from scratch and made a pitch to your institution to do something about it, and maybe it could help Jules.
Yeah, so I think we should practice what we preach. So the Office of Entrepreneurship is a startup, and we are very active with customer discovery and really active with practicing what we preach in our programs. Our programs continue to evolve. I think the entrepreneurial is a key strong value proposition. I would say that that's the example of the nurses. Our nursing are really interested, but they are interested in seeing things that they are solving, problems they solve at Mayo, manifest in other hospitals and healthcare systems. And that means it's going to have to be able to have a successful technology transfer. And so I'm just, those are, so they even though they are focused on an entrepreneurial, they have an outward facing entrepreneurial spirit and culture. So I think that you want to look for those areas that have those components. Another side to this is, I think that technology transfer, some people ask me what my ideal, I think, especially for PhD students or postdocs, you should walk the technology out of your institution. That you have a moral authority tied to that technology that a lot of other places can't. And if we can find a way to make that happen, I think it would be a completely novel opportunity to expand technology transfer. Our technologies, still most of them sit on a shelf in most of our institutions. And so we need to find other ways to get to partner with technology transfer offices or other programs to get the technologies out. So that's another value proposition that you can offer. I think you need to figure out in your ecosystem where the value proposition is. Since we started from scratch, we had to do everything. I don't recommend that. I actually think figuring out what one or two key areas are is my recommendation if you're trying to build it internally.